I'm here with Dr. Doug Frank. This was our first time meeting in person, and thanks for coming and sitting down with me. I have to ask though, about 60 peer-reviewed publications you have?
Yeah.
Okay, how does a scientist with that many peer-reviewed publications become an election integrity pain in the ass to the system?
What a great idea, great question. My specialty, I'm a physicist, and it's kind of actually a blend of chemistry and physics, but my specialty is you make a bunch of measurements, you do a bunch of computing, you do a bunch of modeling, and then you figure out what's going on. And elections are just another big data set
Right.
that you can model and make predictions. And so it started out actually as just a hobby when I was a youngster, but I began modeling elections in 1980. I modeled Reagan's first, I predicted that, and I've predicted every election since until 2020. I even predicted Trump was going to be the president 13 months in advance before there were 17 people in the primary. So I like models to make predictions because I hate speculating randomly. And just because you make a model doesn't mean you know the future. I'm not a prophet, but it's fun to kind of say, hey, can I predict this? Can I predict that? So what happened is after the 2020 election, I was kind of stunned because I predicted everyone until then.
Wow.
And the state of Pennsylvania contacted me, and the legislature there, they were doing an audit. Doug Mastriano had asked for that, and they said, hey, would you come help us out with this? And so I was part of a 6-member team. We did a serious audit. We got to see anything we wanted to see, unlike the Maricopa audit, for example. We got to see everything. And we uncovered a ton of fraud. I mean, a lot of fraud. And I developed a bunch of algorithms, of course. I was focusing on Montgomery County. That's where the 4 Supreme Court cases were from.
Right.
So the lawyers asked me to focus on that. I was in 2 of those 4 cases. My analyses were, and we were doing door knocking to confirm what I was finding with my algorithms. Because when you're in a county with 500,000 voters, you don't look at them one at a time. You write computer algorithms. So that kind of got me going. And then when I discovered that Pennsylvania wasn't interested in my results, I was pretty shocked. Because I expected, well, aren't you a Republican majority legislature? Don't you not like it that your guy failed? You know, are you kidding? No, none of our legislatures like Trump at all. There isn't one. The Republicans might give lip service to him because they know they win that way, but they don't like him. So that's what was going on. And I ended up studying in Florida and North Carolina and Ohio and Colorado. And then Mr. Lindell discovered me, made a movie about me. The rest is history.
Mr. Lindell.
Yeah, Mike Lindell. I told my wife I'm going to give up my income for 6 months. We're going to save the country, and then I'll be back to work. Here I am 4.5 years later.
Yeah, that's like 2 weeks to flatten the curve. 2 years later.
Well said. I'm gonna use that. That's exactly right.
All right, we just geek out for a minute. Even if you lose me or we lose anybody, what kind of like algorithms and we're using artificial neural networks, genetic algorithms. Like, what did you do since the 80s, and how has it evolved for your election predictions?
Oh, yeah. Boy, you asked a question that's definitely hitting my geek button. Okay, so I learned differential equations my first year in college.
Yep.
And differential equations, everything that happens in the universe can be described by a differential
Absolutely.
equation. Okay, and so once you understand them and how to use them and apply them, it's like everywhere you look, you see, oh, I can describe that with a differential equation. So I was hooked. Then I learned Fourier transforms. And then that was it for me, okay? Because now I can handle anything periodic, I can handle anything. And when you combine statistics with that, suddenly you are like equipped. And one of my first favorite things, I mean, I did the 1980 election with Reagan, but then I also started modeling epidemics. So I did AIDS epidemic, which was happening right then. I did SARS-CoV-1. I did the Ebola epidemic in 2015. And then of course along came 2020 and COVID. And I was modeling COVID in 30 countries and every county in America. I had 150,000 followers, unique followers every week on my websites. Around the country. So that kind of thrust me into the political realm because it was an election year and politicians were asking me questions. And so that's why they knew about me as a numbers guy, which is why I got asked to help out in Pennsylvania.
That's so wild.
But really I'm in my soul, I'm a scientist.
So most of your modeling is like differential calculus.
Most of it is, yeah. And I like building computer models, which computer models are not always solving equations. Sometimes they're Monte Carlo based, where, for example, let's say you were going to try to write an equation to describe the rolling of a dice. You don't necessarily say, well, it's going to be 1/6 probability. You roll a dice 6 times or 600 times, and then the numbers work out to be right. And so that would be called a Monte Carlo calculation, where you're doing something random that eventually converges to something. Well, in real life, you can't always write the differential equation that describes it, because there's friction, because there are random interferences. Try describing the ellipse of a planet orbiting our sun. Okay, it's approximately elliptical,
right?
Because its orbit's being affected by other planets. So my point is that the ideas in differential equations, you still apply and you still use them, but I'm not always solving the equations. A lot of times I'm just applying them and then putting them in a simulated environment that I write to predict what's going to happen. Fourier transforms are fun because everything in the universe is harmonic. Everything in the universe is periodic. And so when you combine the differential equations approach with the harmonics, you can model anything and you can nail it. And so that's...
You're starting to sound like Tesla. Everything's frequency.
And it's true. I know all about Tesla. So I'm a physicist, and I build electronics for a living. So I know a little bit of thing about Ohm's law. But anyway, so that was geeking out. Forgive me for geeking out, but you asked.
I'm glad you did. And you actually snuck in what I was getting at in there when you said random interference.
Yeah.
Because what my question is, if you've been getting this right since the 80s, your calculations accounted for fraud.
Yes, they did. And my calculations on COVID accounted for fraud.
Tell me about that. Wow.
So here's the thing. Okay, now we're really geeking out.
Yes.
Okay. So during COVID, you realize every week they were reporting number of cases. But there were interesting patterns to the way that those cases were being reported, because of the way hospitals work, because the way reporting networks report, because the way the governments interact with the medical establishment. And so it was really interesting, because you'd have more cases of COVID reported on Monday than Sunday. Why would that be?
Interesting.
Okay, there's no reason why more people would have it on Monday than Sunday, right?
Yes.
Except that there's more reporting.
And there it is.
So it's multiple things going on simultaneously. And so what I did is I developed an empirical model for the reporting part of it, if that makes sense.
It does. Yeah.
And then I have, it's called Farr's law. It's a first order differential equation to predict the shape of an epidemic. And I combined that with the periodicity, the 7-day periodicity. There was a 5-day periodicity. And once you get all the epidemiological factors tuned in, and you mix all that together, I was predicting how many people were going to die in every county in this country within a fraction of a percent every week by April.
You mean how many people were going to have been reported to have died?
Thank you for saying that. Thank you for saying that. You're precisely correct. And so what happened was my models were working everywhere. And then suddenly in Ohio, they quit working. And I was like, well, why would the epidemic be different in Ohio than it is everywhere else?
I think I know where you're going.
And so what did I do? I'm a programmer. I got behind the HTML code of the websites. I found out where they were getting their data. I tracked it all back to their source data. And for about a month, I tracked all the deaths that they were reporting. In fact, I even connected up with Tom Rentz at that time in Ohio, a famous attorney there.
I know
and
Tom.
we were getting all the death certificates, and I was helping. I was part of that. It was pretty cool. And so anyway, I discovered that what was happening is in Ohio, the reason my models quit working is because it wasn't following an epidemiological model. What it was doing was, Amy Acton, the health director of Ohio, was going back into history and reclassifying former deaths, flu deaths, accidents, you name it, reclassifying those COVID deaths and reporting them at the present. So once I discovered that was happening, I had to come up with a strategy. So I worked with a local Ohio, he's an investigative journalist, Jack Windsor's his name.
Okay.
He and I became friends, and I explained what was happening. He's like, I'm on it. He was one of these guys that gets to go to the press conferences and ask questions. So the governor would get up, give his presentation, and he would ask questions. So for 2 weeks, we set up Amy Acton because she was at each of those meetings. And then the third weekend, he asked the right question, and we exposed the fact that that week, 72 deaths. I'm sorry to report that there were 72 new deaths of COVID this week. We knew that's what he was going to say because I already had the source data that he was going to use.
Wow.
And so, and then Jack had to simply say, well, wait a minute. John Doe, who died 3 months ago, that's one of the 72. And all the other 71 died on these dates, and just started listing them off.
Wow.
6 months prior. She had to resign. Okay. Wow. So, and by the way, she's running for governor now in Ohio.
Wait, what year was this?
This was 2020.
Oh, wow.
It was during the COVID epidemic. So we got her to resign during the middle of the epidemic.
Did you have any, black vans parked outside of your house after that? I mean, that's pretty ballsy.
I didn't, no, but I became very famous in the town. In fact, in Ohio, and I had a podcast. We called it the Ohio Post Depressor, because the pressers, the governor would give pressers.
Yeah.
They would be depressing, and so we would come on, and I had panels coming on podcasts, and we would stream during the podcast, and we would be debunking everything we were saying, and then afterwards we'd have a discussion. I was 5,000 live views regularly. And it was a very successful podcast, but that's also what thrust me into the public arena, which is why politicians all around the country, oh, you're a scientist. What's a PCR test? Would you explain that? And what is the difference between a case and a death? And how do we know if it's COVID? And what about motorcycle accidents? And what about our healthcare system? And so I began interfacing with the medical establishment, and a lot of these doctors were leaving because it wasn't really medicine anymore. And so that was kind of my, and I just confess that was my awakening year. I mean, I was already aware of all the climate change crap because I've been tracking and modeling the climate. Okay, sorry, here I am geeking out. I've been modeling the climate since 1981. And
for future conversation, not for this.
Yes.
I'm a big weather modification nerd.
Yeah, oh yeah.
I've been doing it for a couple decades. I'd love to geek out with you on that.
I can give you 10 simple mechanisms that are already proven for modifying weather modification.
Next rad.
It is absolutely possible. In fact, when all the talk about climate change and global warming was still back in the early 2000s, the geoengineering community came out and said, this is no problem. If we have global warming, we've got all these ways we can cool the planet. There's no risk here. No, we're not in trouble.
If you live in the Truman Show, what is climate change? It means we've changed it.
Right. And so anyway, that's a whole other discussion.
That's a whole other discussion.
But we could definitely geek out on that. But along my journeys, I've been shocked because I've had all this government connection and weaving in and out of all these public officials. I've come across all this sex trafficking stuff. I had no idea. I spent most of my career in the ivory tower with my publications, my science, and I got nominated for a Nobel Prize in 1990 in chemistry.
I don't know that.
It made the cover of Science magazine, Nature magazine. I was traveling the world talking about my discoveries.
Tell me about that. What was that for?
Well, my discipline, my formal discipline is what they call surface electroanalytical chemistry.
Okay.
It's you study the way molecules behave at surfaces.
Gotcha.
And you control what's the surface potential is like with doing electrochemistry. Think of it like electroplating. You can make stuff stick on if you bring the potential to a certain thing. Well, but you can also control molecules. And what neurotransmitters are? That's a surface phenomena. The cell changes potential to control how molecules behave. So one of the cool things about my field is that you're able to manipulate molecules just using what you put in a solution and how you manipulate the potential of the surface. But that's a whole other thing. But I was interested in how do molecules behave at surfaces, so I developed these techniques, and I developed a way to take and kind of freeze what its surface status is, take it out, put it in a vacuum, and look at it with electron microscopes. And I developed special electron microscopes that allowed me to produce three-dimensional images of those molecules. No one had ever accomplished that before. And when I figured out how to do that, I actually wasn't trying to do that at first. I was just trying to explore one aspect of it, and I discovered a phenomenon that nobody had seen before. In fact, when I first announced my results, everybody was like, that can't be right because it contradicts this other way of thinking that we think is the right way of
Uh-oh.
thinking. And so I had to overturn a paradigm.
Uh-oh.
And so you can see,
Yeah.
Anyway, but the data are the data, and in long term, I was still standing, and all the other stuff was
There
fine.
goes reverse osmosis and capillary action out the door.
There you go. So good words, good word. Now you're
You're
speaking
talking
my
about
language.
surface, and it's all coming back to me. I was initially in college as a chemical engineer.
Oh, so yeah.
I switched to systems engineering because I just looked down the road and was like, I don't think I want to be in a DuPont factory.
There you go.
Doing stuff.
Yeah, yes.
But,
and
you know,
Paul, yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah.
I'm with you on all that. So then let's talk about Rev17 for a second.
Yeah,
so
sure.
we're here at the Rev17 conference
Yeah.
in Yuba City, California.
Yep.
At the Church of Glad Tidings.
Yes.
Pastor Dave Bryan, incredible group of speakers here today. What brought you out here, and like, what was the message you wanted to get to everyone?
So what happened was I was traveling. I've been traveling the country almost every day for 4.5 years. As I spoke here because they like bringing in national speakers, and so I came in and spoke. And Dave and I got connected. I think it was the first one was a Bard's Fest, and then he invited me back, and I got to preach and teach.
Yes.
And again he invited me back for another one, and so we become good friends. And on one of our recent trips. One of my recent times with he explained, hey, you know, we've discovered this need. You know, they have this saying, find a need and meet it. That's their. And he said, we gotta. There's all these trafficked children out there that need a place to go where we can take care of them. And he said, so I started talking about my experiences on the road, all this child trafficking stuff that I've encountered. And he's like, wow, you know, and so the chemistry just started, and about 6 months ago, he asked me to serve on the board of Piece of Heaven. And so when he asked me to do that, I'm like, well, I guess if I'm going to be on the board, I better learn a little bit more about how we take care of sex trafficked kids in the country. So I started researching it, and I realized, holy mackerel, this man is insane. He is trying to take on an amazingly huge mission. So if he's going to be successful, it's going to have to be a God thing.
Yep.
And so I started working with him, starting working with the team. We put together this big fundraiser, Rev17. I spoke twice yesterday. In the morning, I talked about the sex trafficking that I've learned around the country. People need to realize it's not just bringing in kids from other countries. It's right here in your own neighborhoods. They steal your children. This is real, okay? And so that was my morning talk, and then my afternoon talk was, what is our vision for Piece of Heaven? Where are we going, and how are we going to get there? And we've had 2 board meetings since I've been here, so that's really why I'm here. I'm part of this mission, and you know, it's supposed to be embargoed. You're not supposed to know how well we've done on our fundraising, but trust me, it's going to be you're going to get good news this afternoon.
Oh, I can't wait to hear it. For the folks who don't know what we're talking about, Piece of Heaven, Sanctuary is in process, and it requires purchasing a woman's prison that was $17 million, and they got it down to $4 million.
$4 million, yes.
And they were what, halfway to that goal when we started this.
2 days ago, we had about 2.1 million in the bank, and we did this fundraiser to try to get the balance.
Yeah.
And that's all I'm going to say.
It sounds like we're going to find out at the end of this event that they are able to get the prison. And then that's incredible. There's 500 people here. It's basically a sold out event.
But it's been streaming all over the country.
It's been streaming everywhere. People are stepping up. People are getting involved in helping, and it's incredible. People used to bury their head in the sand for this topic. It was too much to admit that the world is that dark, but now people are actually getting involved in making a difference.
Well said. When I was in college, Philosophy 101, the professor said, how do we know that there's absolute truth? Well, is it always wrong to torture infants for your own pleasure? That's 40 years ago in Philosophy 101.
He chose those words.
Exactly those words. And if you believe it's always wrong to torture infants for your own pleasure, then you believe in absolute truth. Well, if you believe in absolute truth, then what is the source of that absolute truth? You know, and so it's kind of a philosophical argument. But that stuck with me all these years, and here I am dealing with is it wrong to? It is now. Piece of Heaven is not going to be doing the rescue. piece of heaven is, what do you do with these kids once they are rescued?
Right.
And you can't just recycle them into the foster care system.
No.
It's not designed for that, and it's also corrupt. And in fact, there's a big
That's
lawsuit.
basically putting them back in trafficking.
100%.
Just government subsidized trafficking.
There's a big lawsuit in Southern California coming out with a big settlement. I think it's $400 million settlement about to be paid to a bunch of foster kids who were sex trafficked in the system. So so we can't just put them back in there. We need a special place. And these kids, they don't just need psychological and trauma and emotional kinds of treatment. They also need physical care. A lot of them need reconstructive surgery. It hurts to say it. I don't want to go into the details, but you can imagine that there would be surgery up here and there'd be surgery down there. That these kids would need to get back in one piece, so to speak. And then you've also got the spiritual element, which is why Glad Tidings is involved. This church is known for its spiritual warfare, and it's basically saying we're taking on, and they called Revelation 17 destroying the whore of Babylon. They're basically throwing the gauntlet down at Satan and say, bring it on, we're taking you on, buddy. Name another church in the country that's like that.
No.
It's a special place, so I'm so proud to be here speaking to these people.
And it's so cool that you're on the board. I mean, this is a special place. This is my first time up here. I wasn't expecting this scope, and like I told you earlier, it's the first time I've been in an event where there's a sniper on the roof.
Yes.
And the security, and it's crazy to think that something that should be so universally accepted as protecting children requires heavy security, but there's been no incidents, and I don't think there ever could be.
Peace through strength, baby.
This team is incredible. Not only do we all have the shield of God, the armor of God, these guys have body armor, and
they're carrying automatic weapons, rifles, and you name it. It's awesome.
It really has. It's really been super cool. I'm glad we got to sit down. I know you're going to come on my show because
be delighted.
We have a lot to talk about. I'll tell you one thing. I took one elective in college, because when you're studying engineering, you don't have time for electives. You know that. And you're a physicist.
Been there, done that.
One of my roommates, I lived in a house, so I had like 6 guys I lived with. One of them was a physics major. And he goes, take quantum with me. I was like, my one elective, I'm going to take quantum mechanics. And we would sit around and get philosophical about science.
You have to, because quantum takes you there.
So that's why we took quantum, because we were like, we're going to have so much to talk about back at the house at night. We got in there, every lecture, the teacher went to the board and she started writing out differential equations. That was it for an hour and a half. And we were like, wait, what's this? Relativity. And for the first 2 classes, we were like, this is not what we expected. After that, we started realizing, okay, let's grasp what we're doing. And then we would go home and talk about, so literally differential equations on the board, deep philosophical discussions. And it was incredible. And you're making me miss those days. I wonder if I had stayed on that path right now.
Well, I remember how much I enjoyed that stuff in college too. And I went to the philosophy professor and I said, I want to be a philosophy minor. Isn't that an interesting coincidence? That the more you get into science and the more deeply you get into math, suddenly you start thinking about philosophical things.
Right.
And the professor, he was such a wise man, and he just said, no, Doug, he says, you should stick to I had a music minor going at the time. He says, stick to your music minor. It's far more practical. You can always do philosophy. And so here I am, I'm doing philosophy to these days. And he's right. Philosophy is not a very practical field, but in essence, we're all real philosophers.
We're all philosophers because we don't know anything about anything. The irony is, when I was young, I started life as a Catholic. I moved away from God because I was in sciences very early.
Yeah.
And I thought, I'm just too smart for this God thing. Yeah. Because I'm an engineer, I'm a scientist.
Yeah.
And the irony is that now I realize through science that I don't know anything. I'm making observations,
well said,
and drawing conclusions based on the available data, which changes constantly and is very limited. So at the end, I can say I know more than a lot of people, but I don't know shit about shit. And God is the only constant that I have in my life.
Well done. He is. I like what C.S. Lewis said about this. He said, men of science looked for law in nature because they believed in a lawgiver.
Wow, C.S. Lewis is one of the best.
and he's referring to Pascal and Boyle and Newton, Copernicus and Boyle and Maxwell and Faraday and all these guys. And most people never read the actual real scientists. They read about Newton's laws. They read about Copernicus and the revolution, the revolutions of the planets. They read about Maxwell's equations. But did you ever read anything Maxwell ever wrote? Did you read anything Newton ever wrote? Nobody reads what this. Well, I've spent a lifetime reading those guys. They're brilliant scientists.
Yep.
Because like you said, in our churches, and this drove me as a youngster, my pastor couldn't answer the simplest questions I had. And I just thought, kind of like you, why would I want to be a Christian? These churches are full of dumb people. They don't know nothing. It's just all faith and no substance. But the more I learned, it's more like, dude, modern science is built on a foundation of understanding capital N nature and seeing the way it's designed and see it's always all put together. The more I learn, the strongly I love my God and the more I want to serve Him. So that's kind of how my life is.
What do you think the future is going to look like? I think the education system is getting gutted, right? Trump's talked about the free universities.
Yeah.
I presume actual
Public
sciences
education,
will become a thing available to everyone.
Wouldn't that be nice?
And now with the revival happening, I'm hoping and seeing, and maybe there's a future where the people who are drawn towards science, it won't do that wedge that draws you away from God like they had planned. And now the two will go in parallel. Maybe we'll see the young kids pursuing God and science as one and the same.
As someone who did institutional science for so many years, I could see that real science wasn't being done in the universities anymore.
Right.
What was being done is Me Too science. And what that is, we want to get funded because we want to get tenure so we can make a living and be a professor. So we have to write a proposal that we know that the reviewers will approve,
right,
that will get funded by the right agency.
Yep.
And then our papers that we publish are going to have a certain messaging, or this organization isn't going to fund my work anymore, and then I won't get my tenure and I won't write my papers. So it became that rather than genuine researching science. The whole academic field was becoming that, and that was very unfortunate. And so even when I made my discovery, it was difficult at first to rock the boat a little bit. So if government funding is necessary for some things. It's just, it's nice to have the government building roads, okay? It's nice that, but it comes at a cost.
Yep.
And the more that the government does, the less freedom you have, the less creativity you have. So it would be nice to have the government out of that funding. One of the things I'm old enough to remember is when I first was getting into science, we had major research labs, Almaden, IBM research labs, Bell, AT&T Bell labs. You had major laboratories, okay? Companies sponsored laboratories. Why? Because the fundamental science that was being explored in those laboratories would directly lead to major innovations that they could market. Well, all those labs are essentially closed down. Why? Because it was cheaper for those companies, the bean counters like it, let's not pay for a lab, let's let the government pay university labs. But now you don't have creativity anymore. Now you don't have, and so I grew through that.
I hadn't thought about that. That's brilliant. That explains so much.
And so now you have a bunch of scientists who all say, we all want to get funded. So we all put the words climate change in our abstracts, and that's how we get funded. Instead of what is really going on, how do we research this? What are the fundamental properties of the universe? Those could be scientists already. So it's kind of grown into this kind of bastardized. It's not even real science anymore.
That is such a good point. Those labs of
they're
my
all gone.
childhood, I haven't heard about them forever, and I didn't even think about that.
They're gone. That's because the companies, why should they pay? Let the government pay for these other labs. And for a while it was okay during the transition, but now it's just, academic science, the institutional is pretty much gone.
And I got exposed to that in I guess I want to say 97.
Yeah.
I was getting my master's in engineering at Penn, and
Yeah.
I was hanging out in the lab with all the PhDs because I did my undergrad there, so I knew people, and I worked out of a lab, a little private room with a bunch of people, and I got the itch. I was like, I should just stay here. I finished my master's requirement, so I talked to the professor.
Yeah.
He was starting to do artificial neural network research, and it was pretty early then, 97 for that.
Absolutely.
And I was like, this is really cool.
That was DSPs were big then.
Yes.
Digital signal processing, and so it enabled you to do matrix calculations. So you could do a lot of calculations a lot faster. I was doing that stuff.
I thought, you know what? I want to do this. I enjoy this, and they pay for stuff. And
Sure.
It's like,
good money. Yeah.
Let's geek out for 4 years. And the professor, I filled out the paper, goes, you're accepted, because I knew the guy from undergrad and grad. He was like, let's do this. And I was so excited. He goes, okay, now we got to raise the money for you. I'm like, what do you mean? I thought you were doing the research. He's like, no, we got to find someone to sponsor it.
Right.
Which means you're shopping to people based on, their parameters.
Right.
Which are largely coming from the government.
And you have to sound in your proposal like you're addressing their actual request.
Right.
Even though really you're more interested in this.
Right.
And so it's like, I'm not saying that they lie, but it's close.
Yeah. And that was a wake up for me, because
Yeah.
I was like, oh, I'm going to be able to create and think freely. I'm going to be an academic, and I'm going to avoid the corporate. And I realized right then, no, you're going to be subject to not just the corporate, but to the government, and you're going to have a fraction of the money. So you're not really selling out to go take the job in New York on Park Avenue that I took.
Right.
I was like, you're kind of selling out here, because you're pretending to be a scientist, but you're doing what they tell you.
Now you'd said, when you had said the wedge between science and faith, there's a group in the state of Washington, up in Seattle, called the Discovery Institute, and they hold a seminar every summer for young biologists that want to go into academics, and they teach them, if you're a Christian and you want to explore design in nature, you'll never make it into academics, because they will filter you out. And so so they say, if you want to do this, we'll teach you how to navigate the system so that you can get your bachelor's degree and then your PhD, and that you can get established in a real laboratory and do biological research without buying into the existing paradigms, which are bogus anyway. But anyway, so you brought up that wedge thing. It's interesting, if you study the statistics of scientists for the last 100 years in America, the general perception is people say, well, scientists don't believe in God. And that's just so wrong. The way it works, and it hasn't changed in 100 years, if you're in the physical sciences, chemistry, physics, 40% of scientists actually believe in a theistic God. A theistic God is a God you pray to and it matters, okay? A deistic God is one you pray to and it just like doesn't matter. God created the world and walked away. That's a deistic God. No, 40% of practicing physical sciences, chemistry and physics, things like that, astronomy, believe in a theistic God. That's huge, and that hasn't changed for 100 years. Now in biology, it's about half that. So about 20% of practicing biologists believe in a theistic God. They've got evolution to kind of try to explain a lot of what they see. But anyway, I don't want to go down that topic. But so when you talked about a wedge, institutionally, academically, our universities are anti-God, anti-freedom, and pro-government, government solutions for everything, pretty much pro-communist. That's a whole nother topic we can have.
We got a lot of topics to talk about, but let's wrap this up here, because I know you guys.
I know I got to get going.
You've got to meet your person in there, but I appreciate all this time. Tell everyone where they can find you.
Well, I don't have a website. I've tried multiple times. They keep taking them down. So what I've got is social media. Lots of social media. Find me on social media, on Facebook, Douglas G. Frank, no period. Just Douglas space G space Frank. I'm on there. Picture me with my oldest daughter. And then on Telegram, follow the data with Dr. Frank. On Rumble, follow the data with Dr. Frank. I have a YouTube channel that's been up for about 8 months now. It's doing pretty well.
Oh, wow.
And that's Dr. Frank Models. You can find me. I've been putting up all my election work and now some of the Piece of Heaven stuff. So find me on social media. I'm pretty easy. I don't do. Somebody started a TikTok thing for me. I just don't do much of that. But and I don't do an Instagram right now. I don't know why. But find me on Facebook, or you can find me on Vocal VOCOL or Truth. I'm on those. Follow the data with Dr. Frank. Usually it'll pop me up.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Pleasure.
All right, so just while it's rolling, can you just stay in here like we'll pose for a picture? I'll just screenshot it. Thank you guys for hanging out for that. I hope you could see how much fun I had, because that was my first time meeting him, and it was just kind of a blast to geek out. It really was. I got one more